Shoegaze is a genre that's continued to stick around and evolve over the years, especially new artists coming out of the scene like Ivory, Next Time, or even artists like Ecstasy dabbling in the genre. These artists have managed to push the boundary with new and experimental ways of production. So in today's video, we're going to make a track inspired by both new and old shoegaze from start to finish, going in depth on the production techniques used to make amazing shoegaze tracks and seeing how you could apply these techniques to level up your production today. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and get ready to dive into the evolving world of modern shoegaze. In my opinion, every great shoegaze track starts with the drums. Despite the genre being categorized with these luscious, ambient guitar melodies, I always find myself focusing on and starting with the drums, so that's exactly what we're going to do today. Also, just a quick bonus tip, when you do start with your drums, I find it way easier to record your guitar and stay on time, so that definitely helps too. The drums that I'm going to be using for this beat are going to be the Get Good Drums One Kit Wonder Metal Contact Bank. That's a tongue twister for sure, and I chose this because it is the perfect balance of snappy but not too over the top. But honestly, I think you can make any drum sounds sound good for shoegaze. My favorite free alternative is the MT Power Drum Kit 2. It's super dope, and like I said, free, so that is also cool. And to start our drum pattern off, I'm going to play this basic snare like this. And to solidify the rhythm for the track, I'm going to add my kicks, which are going to sound like this. And then to fill things out, I'm going to add a simple open hat with a repeating rhythm, nothing crazy, which is going to sound like this. And right now, this pattern is already sounding super cool. Remember that for shoegaze and most music in general, it isn't about doing the most and fitting as much as you can into a single pattern, and the space is really where the magic happens. But I do want to add just a few more things to make the pattern feel more unique. The first thing that I'm going to add is just a crash on the one. This is going to help our pattern feel a lot more impactful, especially during the chorus, and it's going to sound like this. And the last thing that I want to add is a rhythm snare that's just going to add a little bit more motion and feel to the pattern. And this is what I like to call the core pattern for our track. This is the pattern that you tend to use throughout your track as you record. And once you get to different sections of your song, like the verse or the bridge, you can change things up from there. The mix on your drums is going to be almost as important as the pattern itself. Shoegaze music goes hand in hand with that lo-fi feeling and drowned out drums. So let's go ahead and shoegazeify the drums. Is that funny? So the first thing that I always do for shoegaze drums is add a slight EQ to take out some low end. Sometimes I'll do some high end too. For this track specifically, I didn't, but I always do a little bit of low end cutting. And I think it just helps lean into that low quality speaker feel that a lot of shoegaze tracks tend to have. And if you want your shoegaze tracks to feel super modern and punchy and like have a crisp mix, you can feel free to skip this step. It's just what I'm doing for this specific track. After that, I'm going to throw in some RC20 retro color. This is my favorite go-to plugin if you want to add a gritty lo-fi feeling to your drums, your melodies, pretty much anything in your beat. And every time you use it, you can really crank it and make the effect super exaggerated, or you can kind of just sprinkle it on top as a sort of felt but not heard type of thing. In this specific instance, I'm using the lead detune preset from my Process RC20 preset bank, which has a ton of really cool drum presets that you can add to your mix. And if you want to copy the settings for this specific preset, this is what mine looks like. And lastly, to tie everything together, we need some verbiage. Shoegaze is nothing without its reverb. So for this track, I'm just going to add a fruity reverb. I like to use the drum room preset for something subtle or the large hall preset for something super blown out and dramatic. And honestly, if you guys have any like reverb plugin recommendations, go ahead and comment them down below because I've been using fruity reverb for almost 6 years now. I think it's time for an upgrade. Anyways, this is what our Process drum pattern is going to sound like. If you guys like the way that this drum pattern sounds and want a bunch just like it, I have a crazy bundle for you called the Drum Mastery Bundle. It combines 4 of my best alternative rock drum kits that are perfect for the shoegaze sound, and it includes drum loops, a full drum kit, bonus snare samples, and even an RC20 preset bank that has some crazy gritty, lo-fi feeling presets that you can throw into your drums or melodies to instantly give them a more lo-fi shoegaze sound. And just to thank you for watching this video so far, the first 10 people to use code Shoegaze30 on checkout can get 30% off the bundle. So if you guys are interested, the pack will be the first link in the description. Make sure that you act fast before the codes are used. And with that out of the way, let's get back to the video. Now that we have the main chorus drum pattern laid out, let's go ahead and get our main chorus guitars done next. Shoegaze guitar melodies are super cool because they can get really outside of the box, but you don't have to do anything too crazy to get them sounding super dope. So I'm just gonna start things off with a super basic chord progression. And the first step here is gonna be tuning our guitar to drop D. Now wait. Don't be scared. Okay. I know a lot of you guys probably aren't surprised, but some of you guys might be like, oh shit, I haven't even mastered standard tuning. How am I gonna play a new tuning? Honestly, I used to be super scared and confused of alternate tunings as well, but drop D is probably the easiest one to understand, and it might be even easier than standard tuning to play. Basically, all you gotta do is tune the low E string to D. That's it. And the reason why we're gonna do this is because it allows us to play standard tuning power chords by just playing the first 3 strings open, or by sliding your finger around the first 3 strings like a bar chord. Now that we have that out of the way, I like to get a cool guitar tone before I start recording. Now a huge key to shoegaze guitar tones is putting the reverb before the amp sim and distortion instead of putting it after. So the first thing that I'm going to do for this tone is throw on some reverb. Again, I'm using Fruity Reverb and I'm using the large hall preset. After that, I'm going to throw on my amp sim of choice, which is Guitar Rig 7. I absolutely love this amp sim, and there's also a free demo with a ton of free presets in it. So if you guys want to check that out, I'll leave a link down in the description. And the preset I chose here is the Super Chainsaw 100 preset. It's just this cool, super like fuzzed out sounding sound. And then as always, I cut a decent amount of low end on my guitars, whether it's chords, leads, or anything else. You pretty much always want to cut out the very low lows of anything melodic for your tracks, just so that it doesn't clash with the bass later on. And after all that, we have a super dope guitar tone, and the riff that I came up with for the chords sounds like this. With the drums, this is already sounding pretty dope. Even though it sounds super cool, it doesn't really sound complete yet. And that is where double tracking comes in. For anybody who doesn't know, double tracking is just when you record 2 takes of the same guitar and you pan one to the left and one to the right. And you could experiment with how far to the left or right that you want to pan it, or how many takes you want to pan to the left or the right. But for this beat, I'm just doing a simple double track. So to do this, I'm going to pan the first take all the way to the left, and then after that, I'm going to get a new guitar tone to pan to the right. This one is going to have the same reverb and EQ, but we're going to be using a different Guitar Rig preset. This time, we're going to be using the pure lead preset, and then we are going to play the same chords that we just played before. The only difference is that we have a different guitar tone, and it's being panned to the opposite direction. This right here is going to be a night and day difference from before. Here, there is so much more fullness without us really having to do any extra work. Well, a little bit of extra work, but not really anything crazy. Now, I personally like the sound of this double track, and if you're trying to make shoegaze, I would encourage you to stop here. In some instances, artists and producers will quadruple track or even 6 track. I don't know. Where they do 2 or 3 different takes pan to the left and then 2 or 3 different takes pan to the right. But I find that for shoegaze especially, the genre is pretty well known for its DIY sound, and that usually means means not going too over the top with the amount of layers that you're including, and usually simpler is better. And now that we've laid out the main chords for the track, we kind of have a basis for what we're working with. I'm going to build on it with a bass pattern. Now here is the tone breakdown for the bass. I have a Guitar Rig 7 instance running with the preset called Filthy Bass Rage. It's this super fuzzed out, crazy tone, and because of that, I'm going to add an EQ just to kind of roll off a little bit of the high end, and then one more EQ to take out the super low ends. Now if you're like a sound design guy, you can tell me why people do this. I don't know the exact answer, but for pretty much any alternative rock track, that could be shoegaze, post-punk, indie, doesn't really matter, people tend to cut out the lowest low ends on their bass track. Honestly, I'm not quite sure why people do that, so if you do know, go ahead and comment down below. And the only other thing I'm going to do is make the bass mono, which is something that I do for most of my tracks. And altogether, this bass tone sounds super nasty. Now, shoegaze can go a lot of ways, and like I said, it gets super experimental. So this sort of like crazy fuzzed out bass tone that I have isn't going to work for every single track. It's just going to work for this one. I was watching this guy named Banana Labs who makes super cool shoegaze type videos, and he made a track where he had this like crazy fuzzed out bass tone. So I wanted to try something out pretty similar, but pretty much any bass tone that just involves an amp sim will work for most shoegaze beats. I tuned the bass to drop D as well, which just means tuning the low E string down to D, and then I just follow the root notes of the chord progression like this. With all of that together, listen to how nice and full our track is sounding. I look at the drums, double-tracked guitar, and a bass as the three main pillars for any good alternative rock track. And from there, it's really just about adding counter melodies, ear candy, and different parts of the track for things like verses and bridges. But if you have a solid drum pattern, nice chords, and nice bass, your track is almost guaranteed to have that super full mix that people are always chasing. It sounds really simple, but that's because it is. And this is just your sign that you do not need 10,000 different tracks to get the full sound that you want, and most times less is more. I've said that a couple times during this video, but hey, if it's true, I'm gonna say it. But after I laid all those parts out, I had an idea in my head for this drowned out bending lead. I was listening to a lot of shoegaze songs where they paired reverb and distortion with bending the strings, and it kind of turns your guitar into this more like droning siren sort of sound. So I set up a lead guitar tone, which is that same large venue fruity reverb, Guitar Rig 7 with the JB Metal Rhythm 3 preset, and then another EQ to cut out any lows that might clash with the bass. And from there, I did this stupid simple bendy lead thing that sounds like this. And I really enjoyed the way this sounded, but while I was kind of just messing around with the track, I ended up pitching this down an entire octave, and it made it sound like this. Now you guys can let me know in the comments which one you prefer more. I definitely prefer the pitch down one, so that's what I stuck with, and that basically gets us our finished chorus, which sounds like this. I know a lot of producers might just stop here, looping the same patterns and taking the lead in and out for some variation, but a great shoegaze track needs to have more variation. It has to have an established chorus and verse, a bridge, and an intro. So let's go ahead and switch things up for the verse. The first thing that I'm gonna do for the verse is simplify my drum pattern, mainly by replacing the crazy open hats and crashes with a simple closed hat pattern just to calm things down, and that's gonna sound like this. After that, I wanted to add a new guitar pattern for the verse as well. Something that is, again, more simple. So I'm going to swap out the crazy fuzzed out tones and big chords for something a lot softer. The first guitar tone is going to pan 75% to the left instead of 100%, just because, again, I want the verse to feel a little bit smaller so that the chorus feels more impactful. And the tone itself is just a Michael's Delight preset from Guitar Rig 7, and then a reverb after it. And again, an EQ so that it doesn't clash with the bass. And I'm just going to play the same chord progression, but instead of strumming all 3 strings, I'm going to play the individual notes spaced out like this. Then after that, I'm going to get the right pan tone, which is the Guitar Rig 7 No Worries preset, reverb, and a low end EQ. And to change things up, instead of playing the same exact take from before, I'm going to strum the chords from the chorus just in a little bit of a different strumming pattern, and it's going to sound like this. There was some like clicking and random stuff in the takes that I didn't really love, but I decided to keep them just because Shoegaze is, super DIY lo-fi and doesn't have to be perfect. And then I also messed around with FL Studio's quantize tool for the right pan take and to put everything on grid, but I took a couple of the strums and put them in the wrong spot. I ended up keeping that because I kind of liked the way that it sounded with the left panned guitar, even though I didn't play it that way. And I ended up keeping the same bass tone and pattern for the verse. And when you combine all of that, our verse is going to sound like this. Normally, this is the part of the video where I would go over the bridge that I wrote, but I didn't. There's no bridge. I tried pretty hard, but I just could not get something that sounded right and something that I wanted to keep in the track. And I'm trying really hard to work on the concept of done is better than perfect. Normally, I would spend hours or days trying to get this one part of the track right, but honestly, I want to try to avoid perfectionism for the end of 2025, going into 2026. So listen, for this video, let's just pretend that bridges don't exist, okay? No more bridge. For the intro, I wanted things to be simple as well. So I played the main chorus chords. This time I only did one take instead of a double pan, using Guitar Rig 7 with the Michael's Delight preset, some reverb, and some EQ for the low end, and it's going to sound like this. To make the intro feel a bit more real, I went into my ultimate feedback and noise bundle, which I absolutely love. What this pack does is really help you add this real, raw, like live band recording feel to your tracks, even if you don't have a live band. So I went ahead and grabbed the Miscellaneous 4 sound, as well as Ambience 8 and Texture 2, and I laid them out in the intro in a way that kind of feels like an outtake before a live band actually starts playing, and it's going to sound like this. To add even more motion and realness to the track, I went ahead and grabbed the Feedback 27 sound from this pack as well, and I added it every time before the verse moves into the chorus, just again to add another sort of like live band sound to the track, even though we are in my bedroom and not a live band. And the only other thing that I did to finish up this track was add some drum fill variations at the end of the chorus and verse. Again, Shoegaze needs a lot of variation throughout the track, so these are the fills that I came up with. So yeah, if you combine all of this together, you get a super dope Shoegaze track. Before I play the full thing, remember, if you guys want to check out the Drum Mastery Bundle, you can use code Shoegaze30 for 30% off at checkout. Also remember that only the first 10 people to use it are going to get the discount, so act fast if you want it. And without further ado, let's go ahead and play the full track. you guys like this video and you want to check out another one where I make a more heavy, dark inspired shoegaze track, go ahead and click this video right here. Peace.